everybody, welcome to Playbook by Laserforce Loveland. This podcast is a platform for laser tag players to geek out about strategies, stories, and ongoings in the Laserforce scene, and for you to join us as another player at the table. My codename is Mischief, and I'm a player from Loveland, Colorado, who loves to talk tag, and tonight I am joined by, once again, Odin's Fist from Sacramento, California. Welcome, Odin's Fist.
Hey, thanks, Luke, or Mischief. It's
shit,
good to be
they know
back
my
on
name
here.
now. Take it back, cut that out.
Doxing.
Today we're going to be talking about 10 heavy weapons tips for the game of Space Marines 5. Space Marines 5 is a tactical squad game type where two teams try to eliminate the other. Limited lives, limited shots, and one of those positions is the heavy weapons. This game tends to go into competitive scenes. We do tournaments around the world, and so it can be pretty intense. In this position in particular, intense might be the word I'd use to describe it. You want to give like a general overview of the heavy weapons?
Yeah. Okay, so the heavy weapons, you have 3 shot power, 3 hit points, or a shield power, which means that you have the highest shield power of all the classes tied with the commander, and you have the highest shot power. You are the only class on your team that can put every enemy down in one hit. You resupply at a very slow rate, and your maximum for both shots and lives is pretty low. And so it's kind of a high risk, high reward role. You get a lot of benefit out of being able to get your shots off. You're a big threat in the game, but at the same time, you can be punished very easily for overextending. And one interesting little quirk about heavy is that they have a very slow shot speed. They shoot way slower than the other classes, which means there's larger windows in between their shots.
Mm-hmm. It's true. Yeah, these are lots of important facts and features about the heavy weapons. The summary of all of it for me is just that the heavy is kind of like a goalie in soccer. Generally, no nuance included. Generally, the heavy is like the defender of the resupply. That's generally how the heavy is played. They're the big old defender that stops people from attacking. But of course, in a high competitive game like this, especially getting into these high levels, there is so much more to heavy than defending. And today we're going to get into 10 tips. And honestly, I think we should just go right into it. I love your first one, positioning. Talk about positioning, bro.
Oh yeah, positioning, and more positioning. That's what I think to be kind of the key to growing as a heavy player. Like I feel like this is like the bread and butter kind of. I don't think it's necessarily like the strongest point of a heavy, or like it's like the only thing you gotta worry about, but I feel like it's such a solid foundation. You really want to make sure that you're not in places where you'll be hit from behind. So like whereas like scouts and commanders will position forward and more aggressively, and they can take those hits and kind of reposition as long as they're like gaining ground, the heavy really wants to just control territory, and that's really hard to do when you're getting shot in the back and getting put down.
Right.
As soon as your lights turn off, you stop being a threat, and kind of the heavy's biggest strength in the game is just being a threat. The fact that you exist, it will like control parts of the field and ward off enemy players. So you really want to be making sure that you're positioning yourself in ways where you can watch your angles and you have the opportunity to shoot people who are trying to attack you. And then like in a similar sense, or I guess building off of that, when you're being attacked by multiple players, you want to make sure that you're prioritizing positioning against 3 hits over scouts. So say an enemy commander and scout are attacking from different angles, you want to be posted up in a spot to fight the commander first. That's the biggest threat to your team. Your ammo and your medic have a chance to put a pretty solid chance to put a scout down 2 on. A scout could get in, but it's way less likely than letting the enemy commander get in. And now there's a 3 hit, and now your resupply has to shoot one person 3 times between the two of them in order to put him down.
Mm-hmm.
So prioritize positioning against enemy 3 hits, and put yourself in places where you aren't going to get shot in the back. And when you're taking cover, pretty good thing to look out for is spots where you can take cover in ways that give you the advantage in shootouts. One of the best ways to do this is if there's a spot where you can pop out from more than one angle.
Ooh.
When attackers are pushing you and they don't know if you're going to sidestep out from a wall or take a jump shot over the wall, they now have to watch 2 angles. And when, since you have the advantage, since they're pushing you, you can see kind of where they're going. You can juke around that. Other things you can do is if there's walls that have like you have like an extended cubby where you can move around in, you can kind of position different angles to try and get that shot off a little faster, where the attacker has to play kind of a guessing game of where you're at. You can do kind of the a little bit of the like juking stuff that you see a lot of commanders and scouts do, where you can like kind of play around with sitting low or standing tall and see if you can make them do some more guesswork. But really just position yourself in ways where you're giving yourself the advantage in all of the shootouts is really important.
Now, this is a good tip for any player in any class. Why is this specifically a heavy tip?
Well, so I think that there's a lot of a lot of things that can be applied universally. The reason why I'm bringing this up specifically for the heavy podcast is because it has so much more weight here. Because the heavy is trying to,
because they're heavy.
Yeah, because you're like you said, like they're kind of like the goalie, because you're playing such a defensive position. There are such deeper impacts from you being turned off. If the enemy commander gets past you, your last wall between the enemy commander and your resupply is now down, and that's a really big deal. And then also, because of the reduced shot speed, it's a lot harder for you to trade with multiple people at once. So like, whereas a commander might be able to take a shot against a scout and then turn around really quick and react to a shot against another scout and get 2 shots off really fast. The heavy has such a slow shot speed that's a lot harder to get that off. And so you get punished a lot more for fighting multiple people at a time. Which is why you really want to be kind of prioritizing and taking that one fight at a time as much as possible.
Yeah. Yep, I definitely know why it's a heavy question or why it's a heavy tip, but I wanted to ask you to get your thoughts. Straight up, the heavy might be the most impactful position in the game, just for having the 3-shot power. Wherever the heavy goes, they have the ability to push out anybody that they're fighting against. Even if it's an enemy heavy plus other players, you as a heavy have a ton of threatening potential for the enemy team. People have to focus on you. People are going to call out where you're going. And so where the heavy in particular is positioned, I think it's an important tip, because not only is there nuance to helping you fight enemy players, but wherever the heavy is positioned, other players on your team should position around you, giving you the prime spots and helping you succeed at your job. The heavy is such a stressful role. They're often in charge of defending the resupply, and when a heavy fails at their job, it can often mean that their entire team gets pushed out of the base and flushed, and they lose a ton of lives. Or if they're not looking the right way, someone comes in and takes away a medic life out of their medic, because like resupply can't always defend against other 3 hits, but you can. It's a lot of responsibility.
Yeah, so much responsibility. Um, yeah, I wouldn't say. Yeah, I would definitely say that heavy is probably one of the most impactful roles as far as controlling the field. Um, it, I think all the roles are probably equally as important. But
Yeah, that's not.
because of the deep impact and consequences of the role, it's definitely, in my opinion, the most stressful. Um, Being shot down as a commander is typically a very like self-punishing uh, event. It's
Hmm.
okay. You've been deactivated. Maybe you get reset, but you're moving and you're recovering. Being put down as a heavy bears so much more weight because you have people relying on you to protect
Hmm.
them. And it can be a stressful feeling.
Absolutely. It's really important that the heavy does their job. I mean, it's so important to recognize that all the roles are impactful. I'm never not going to be saying that. At
Yeah.
high level play, especially, I mean, if yeah, a team with one weak link versus 6 players that are all solid, like the difference is really um, it shows at that level.
Yeah.
But when I'm playing like a members night game, and if we have a team with 5 solid players and one weak link, the heavy is the last position that I would put the weak link on. I'd literally rather give the weak link player commander instead of heavy. I think that
Right.
literally is a
Eh,
better shot at winning the game. To have your commander fail at their job than to have the heavy fail at their job.
This wasn't one of the tips, but tangent time.
Go ahead.
uh, yeah, no, I agree, and I think a large part of that is because the heavy exudes so much control over the game
Hmm.
that uh, the heavy can control the game and allow other people more opportunity to work.
Hmm.
Almost like you could almost like spoon feed your commander, right? And this is something that
Seriously.
was kind of happening. Okay, I mean, okay, not to use that exact analogy in this situation, but uh, one of the things that was happening in uh, New Zealand Nats this year was the Brisbane team. If Taipan was having a hard time getting in, Rusty would actually go out as a heavy and put people down and allow Taipan to go in so that so Rusty would break the wall for him, and then Taipan could go and get points and special points and build towards nukes.
Mhm.
And I mean, it's a really good strategy. And this isn't. I know we were just talking about commanders being weak links potentially, but I wouldn't consider Taipan to be a
Taipan
weak
is not a
link.
weak link.
It's just showing how much control the heavy can have
Yeah, it
over the
shows how
game
powerful the heavy is.
and how they can enable everyone else. And so it's kind of that thing where it's like even weak players can do a lot when they're enabled. Um, and it's just so much harder for a commander to enable a heavy than it is for a heavy to enable a commander. Um, and so yeah, when you're talking about like
Did you
strength
mean
of the
that
team,
reversed?
it's a lot harder for a commander to enable a heavy than a heavy to enable a commander. Is
Yeah,
that
I
what I
think
said?
I think you said opposite. On the
Oh yeah,
playback, I might
I
be.
meant that.
Maybe I'll be wrong. I don't know.
I meant that. Whatever I said. It the commander can't really do so much to allow the heavy to do their work as much as a heavy can enable a commander to. And a large part of that is just because you're able to put enemy 3 hits down in one shot, which kind of ties into like what I view the role of the heavy as like a base, like a learning version. The heavy is a defensive position, and that is true. It is easiest for you to shut down enemy attackers, and to do it safely. And there's a lot of mechanical reasons to that on a defensive aspect. But I believe like the role of the heavy really boils down to shutting down the enemy 3 hits. Um, I think that hypothetically, if you could be, and again, purely hypothetical, if you could be just across the field from your resupply, but resetting the crap out of the enemy three hits just back and forth and just keeping them out of the game, you're
Hmm.
doing your job. Uh, you're actually doing an insane, both defensively and offensively. Um, but I mean, there's some reasons why you probably shouldn't be doing that. You want to be getting resupplied. The heavy needs a lot of resupply throughout the game, so you want to stick close to your resupplies and things like that. Um, but being able to control the enemy three hits is one of the is probably what I would say the core of the heavy position, and it's where the skill expression in the heavy role really lies. When you see strong commanders go against each other and one or strong heavies go against each other, sorry,
Hmm.
and one heavy is just completely shutting down both the enemy three hits, it all of a sudden the commander difference doesn't bear as much weight.
Hmm.
Um, the enemy commander might be better than yours, but if their enemy commander is getting shut off every 20 seconds by your heavy, then they have that much less field presence. And it's just, yeah. Yeah, sorry.
Absolutely.
Big tangent. But
Love your tangents.
yeah, heavy has so much weight and impact. And like I said, like every role is equally as important. It's equally as
Hmm.
important for uh your commander to do their job. I think specifically the concept of where you put weaker or stronger players lies more in a team building setting. It's less to do with, okay, well, the heavy's a more important class. It's more just, okay,
Yeah.
well, here's where the skill influences the flow of the games and these points. When you're talking about strong teams playing against strong teams at the peak of the game, it's not that the heavy's more important. It's more that when you're kind of working with the pieces that you have, where do you put your influence over?
Well, you at that level, at the high competitive level, you run into a different set of priorities than you do at the members night level. Because
Absolutely.
the truth is that that might be somewhat of a comforting lie that like the heavies like just as important as every other role in the context of like a standard game. Like if all your players are exactly the same in skill level, then you can focus it more on like teamwork. But like your heavy needs to do their job, or your
Yeah,
team is almost guaranteed to fail if the other enemy heavy is doing their job. But to your point,
absolutely.
at like a high competitive level, everyone should be able to play heavy reasonably well. Then there's like different styles of heavy play and different synergies that work out to make certain people better on heavy than others. Um, the commander and the heavy need to synergize. The heavy and the ammo and the resupply need to synergize. And what type of an arena is it? Is it one that favors like a turtle style heavy, or one that favors an aggressive heavy, or a territory control style heavy?
Yeah,
If you're first starting out heavy, like playing defensive and guarding your resupply is a pretty safe bet no matter what arena you're in. But as we get into these really high levels, the best heavies begin to take charge of the game by making judgment calls that have a huge impact on their team and on the enemy team.
yeah. And the playstyle thing is so important, and I think that's really important for heavy, and maybe even bears having a talking point. Um, to an extent, uh, like there is a level of consistency. The heavy is responsible for defending your resupply, and that's kind of the bottom line. Like whatever you're doing, if you're out attacking and killing the enemy resupply, um, that's something that you can do situationally as long as your resupply isn't dying out. And I feel like where a lot of people, especially players in kind of like uh just like mid tier of heavy play, like they know how to play the role, they're good at positioning, they're good at shooting people, but they haven't quite become like dominating forces on the field in the position.
Right.
Um, I feel like a lot of where they struggle is these judgment calls, like understanding what playstyle they need for that game, the flow of the game, and when it's the right time to do what things. And so going out and overextending as heavy, and throwing your team away and throwing the team structure away just because you're getting a bunch of resets and it feels really good, is it can have some very serious negative consequences. And so it's important to make sure that you're reading the game and that you're taking care of your team's needs and that you're communicating. Because a lot of times, if you just communicate what you're trying to do, your team will let you know if it's a bad decision or what you can do. If you say, "Oh, I'm going to go attack for 30 seconds," maybe your commander will say, "Oh, I got to get full. You can go for 60 seconds. Like you can
Hmm.
go out for a while if you want." Or maybe you're like, "Oh, I'm going to go try and kill the enemy medic," and your team is like, "No, we need you back soon. Their 3 hits are super aggressive."
Hmm.
Then you can at least have that to bounce around, because it's a team game. You have 5 other players. Everyone is relying on each other. Communicate what you're trying to do and listen to what their needs are.
Absolutely. I want to just jump into my first tip. I'm going to skip down to recognize the power and risk of going on the offensive, because this is something that I've seen it in so many arenas either be a game winner or a game loser, where the standard default is heavy is responsible for the resupply, they're defending the resupply. And I probably should have mentioned this at the top. Like, it's not that it's not that I am like a go-to person to listen to on heavy, because I've not had the greatest history of like winning at this point in my career, but I have played heavy a lot in competitive tournaments, so I understand many of the nuances. Um, yeah, you have such a field presence and an ability to deal damage and to put down other 3 hits. So defending your resupply is kind of that base. Coordinating with your team is really important. But if you can get out onto the field and start attacking as the heavy, it's powerful. I mean, I've had numerous, more than I can count on my 10 fingers, so 10 plus times in my career, where I've gone out to attack as the heavy and I put down 4 to 6 people by myself, including the enemy heavy. Because you have the 3 shot power, if you can get the jump on another 3 hit, they have no shot at getting one into you or taking you down. And then the 1 hits, they have no ability to do much either half the time. Um, it's just like a high reward and low risk gamble when you as the heavy go barreling into the enemy defense. It can be really unexpected because it's not a guarantee that at any point the heavy is going to even be attacking you during the game. You can go whole games where you never see a heavy pushing. So many times it's sort of like a wrench that gets thrown into the enemy's game plan. And there's a saying that's like sometimes the best defense is a good offense. And sometimes the best way to keep your team defended is by creating such an impactful attack that the entire enemy team has to turn around, focus on the defense, and stop you. And that can buy your team time to fill up. But at the same time, going on the offensive, it does leave your resupply vulnerable. And if either the commander or the heavy or both decide they want to attack your resupply are going to lose a bunch of lives. No matter how good they are, they just can't fight 3 hits by themselves. Most of the time. And there's also the inherent risk, as Odin mentioned, that you have low hit points and shots. So it's not like you can stay out there very long. And if you start playing like a commander, you're gonna find yourself at like 8 lives, 8 shots, and then enemy nukes might start going off, and things can go south really quickly on heavy if you're not playing carefully with your lives and you're not playing close to your resupply. So recognizing the power and risk of going on the offensive, I it is a tool that should be used by high level heavy players, but you gotta know the risks because you can just as easily lose the game for your team by attacking the way you can win the game. Thoughts on that?
Yeah. I agree. I think attacking is a very important part of the heavy role. Um, it definitely is a delicate balance. It's really important. I think even lower level heavies need to learn how to attack as heavy. It's scary to send weaker or newer players
More
out
inexperienced
as a
heavies.
heavy, um, but it's important when your commander comes back to get resupplied and you're both sitting in the resupply. There's a lack of 3 hit pressure on the enemy team, and a lot of times what you'll find that that leads to is the enemy 3 hits getting a couple taps of resupply, and then all of a sudden both enemy 3 hits are attacking you while you're trying to get resupplied, while you're trying to defend, and they're not contested. They can do that comfortably because there isn't that threat against their resupply. And all of a sudden, um, you're losing control of the field and your team is getting boxed in. And that is not where you want to be in the game. Getting boxed in is not a good position.
Sounds
Um,
like you want players to learn how to rotate with their commander.
I do. And so that's where rotating with your commander comes in, which is the next tip.
Perfect
If you're
segue.
fine with this, with me cutting over.
I literally
Um,
just handed it to you on a silver platter.
um, rotating
Please.
with your commander is crucial to the game because so much the game comes down to controlling the field. No matter what arena is, no matter how it works, like if it's a point farm arena, you still need to be able to take control of the spots where you can farm with those points. If it's a medic kill arena, you need to be able to control the field in order to get those angles to go in, kill the enemy medic, shoot people in the back while they're going into your medic. If it's like a super turtley arena, you still need to be able to control space so that you can have more room to work with rather than just being boxed in. Field control is everything to the at the end of the day.
Mhm.
I think like there's an extent of like some arenas you want to be spread out more than others. Some arenas you're going to position differently, but at the end of the day, some level of field control is important, and so you need a 3 hit out on the field at most times in order to manage that.
Mhm.
So when your commander needs to get resupplied, you as a heavy need to learn how to rotate, and different situations will call for different methods. But uh, I'll just go over like 3 rotation strategies just to give people an idea, and then you can think of how and when you might want to apply those. Um, the first is kind of the standard. I think that people should learn is the swap and hold.
Mhm.
Um, and this is where your commander comes back. He needs resupply. He was out beating people up, controlling some of the field, and he needs to get resupplied. As a heavy, you can go out and control the space as much as possible. Uh, if you know where your commander was before, or if not, you can look for like where space has been taken and just kind of kick 3 hits out of places and let your scouts post up and just control some of the field. Because when a commander comes back, gets resupply, loses control of the field, goes back out after getting resupply, all of a sudden they have no read on the game. They don't know where people are. They don't know where safe or covered. They don't know. They lose a lot of information. And on top of that, they could lose a lot of potential angles. In a lot of arenas, what happens is in the commander's absence, the enemy commander and scouts will take control of a lot of opposing angles. And all of a sudden, in order for your commander to go out and gain any ground, they're fighting 3 people and your scouts are kind of struggling. And so being able to shut down the enemy commander and take ground while your commander's resupplying and plant your scouts places and just hold ground is so beneficial. It lets your commander get resupplied, go right back out in the field and start doing their job again. And so when you're doing this rotation strategy, you're playing pretty conservatively. You aren't dive bombing, and you can pretty much go out and hold until your commander goes back out into the field, and then you
Mhm.
can kind of just swap back with them. Um, Another strategy is the medic kill. Uh, this is where like your commander, maybe either your commander hasn't been able to get in, they've just been farming points, or maybe the enemy resupply has been flushed, they're really flustered, but your commander just ran out of juice and needs resupplied. In both those situations, it can be beneficial for the heavy to go and really pressure the enemy resupply, really make sure that they're stressing out. I think kind of okay. So I think a lot of this also gets into like some commander stuff. There's like
Hmm.
some things about like commander gameplay and the state of flow in the commander game, but um, without turning this into a commander tips video, if especially if your commander and the enemy commander are going back for resupply at roughly the same time, being able to pressure the enemy resupply and try to keep their commander from getting resupply, specifically that one especially, can control so much of the flow of the game. If your commander can get resupplied twice, three times as fast and get out into the field while their commander is still filling up, you can take control of the flow of the game pretty easily. Um, and that's I've had times. I know I call this the medic kill strategy. It's really just pressuring the resupply. Obviously, if you can get into the enemy resupply and beat them up, do it.
Hmm.
In these situations, um, but I've had times where I knew that the enemy commander was really low. I knew that they were struggling. And so as a heavy, I would go and I would specifically do whatever I could in my power to stop them from getting resupplied. I would run straight in to fight the enemy commander, put them down, or I try to fight the ammo or the medic, whatever they needed more of. Um, just anything possible just to keep them from getting resupplied. And I had a game where I did this, and I actually died out of the game early doing it,
Hmm.
which I don't recommend doing that. Um, but there was a trade off in it for me. I knew that my commander had nukes. I knew that my team was gearing up for a big push, and the enemy commander had zero shots and was low on lives. And so I just went in, and every single time I tagged at least the commander or the ammo, at least one of those every time. That was my goal. I was at least going to put one of them down. And I did it over and over and over again. And every time I came back up, I would put one of them down. And so over the span of this like minute of time, the commander got no shots. They had zero ammo.
Was
And
there an
so
enemy
then
heavy there this whole time?
uh there was an enemy heavy for the later part of it because they called him back because the commander needed to get resupplied,
Of course, yeah.
which is something you sometimes you have to defend as heavy while your commander's getting resupplied. If they really need it and the enemy team is pressuring, you have to just put up a commander can fill real quick. Um, but even still, I would swap angles. I did everything that I possibly could to stop that from happening. And so there was a minute span where the enemy commander got no shots, and all of a sudden my commander was filled up quite a bit, was able to push out and apply some pressure and start dropping nukes. And I died out of the game because of a series of unfortunate events that happened, and
Ah,
also my own hubris because I
classic.
stayed out really low. Um, but as a result, uh, we actually were able to start killing off the team and flush the resupply and do all this stuff while the commander still had no shots. And so that's just more time where the commander's not getting shots, more time where nothing's happening on that end. The medic dies out, the ammo dies out, and so even if their commander eventually gets shots, they were taken out of the game for so long that we were able to take control and put them on the back foot before it even mattered. Um, so, moral of the story: don't die, but inhibiting the enemy commander's resupplying can help you take control of the momentum of the game.
Yeah, definitely. And then you had one third point here. I have
Oh
stuff to
yeah,
say about all this, but you have
uh,
three strategies that you're trying to give to these aspiring heavy players.
the third rotation strategy is the wham bam double three hit slam.
Love it.
Uh, this is where your commander is having a hard time getting into the enemy resupply. The enemy heavy just has his number. They're just going crazy, or it's just too much for them to break in. Uh, your commander can go back and say, hey, I need to get into the enemy resupply. It's not happening. I'm not breaking through. Maybe your commander grabs a tap or two, and you and the commander go out together as a unit for you to break through that wall so that your commander can do their job. This rotation is very much you do your job. It's you go out and you do your job. You're trying to break through the wall for your commander. You go out, you break through, you help your commander get in. You're such a strong force out there, right? It's so much to deal with it. But once you do that and your commander's in and they're doing their work, then you can go back. You can go back, defend the resupply, fill up, do all that stuff. So yeah, I think one of the big things with these rotations is understanding when to come back. So the double 3-hit attack, you want to come back once your job is done. Obviously, if it doesn't work and you guys get beat up, you still have to go back for resupply, and that's just unfortunate. The swap and hold, you go back when your commander comes back out into the field to take their place. And with the meta kill strategy, what I like to do is put some sort of limiter on myself. I will either say, okay, I'm going out for 30 seconds or I'm going out for 60 seconds. For me, time works really well. I know some people have a really hard time with that. I know some people will say like, oh, I'm going out for 30 seconds, but they lose track. So something you can do is just check your shots and lives. If you say, okay, I'm going out and then I'll come back if I lose 4 lives, or if I spend 10 shots, I'll go back. Just something where you can kind of measure like how long you're out, because it's not just a matter of resupply, which is important. You don't want to stay out and, oh, I spent all my shots and now have no shots to defend with while I'm getting resupplied, or, oh, I'm low and might get nuked out. But it's also a matter of game pacing, tempo. If you stay out for 2 minutes as a heavy, even if you did a bunch of work or even if you didn't lose anything, you're now kind of disrupting the flow of the game. A lot of that backline pressure is now on your commander and your scouts, which isn't ideal. So really, like at the end of the day, you gotta learn how to rotate. You gotta know when and how, like what you need to do. But that coming back part is really important. I think that's where a lot of people slip up, is they just don't know when to come back, and so their rotations either aren't very effective, or they do work, but then they stay out too long and suffer a lot of consequences as a result.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that explanation. I have a lot to say about this, because this feels like an expansion or like an elevated way of thinking from my previous point, where just you think about going on the offensive. That's how we thought about the game in Loveland. I think earlier on, when we were more of a primitive mindset about the game, we were like debating, well, defensive heavy's better, or offensive heavy's better. Like there's these two extremes, but really neither one is going to win you games. You just laid out 3 tactics, 3 I don't know, maybe scripts is a better way of putting it. Just
Maneuvers.
3 maneuvers, 3 ways of positioning yourself that can be swapped between or chosen throughout different points in the game within the context of the game, based on where your team is and where the enemy team is. And that's how you play the game at the highest level. So I inserted into your list, I have 3 more that I just am putting in. Because when you're rotating with your commander, don't forget about what happens initially, where you're the one sort of closer to the resupply and the commander's out. I would just call that the wall, where you're the one defending the resupply. And this is useful when the enemy is putting up an attack against your resupply. I mean, if the commander's trying actively to break in and demolish your medic, just literally stand between the commander and your medic and stop them from coming in that way. That's the wall. It's a classic. It's kind of like maybe even the standard, the golden standard heavy. Yeah. That's what you should do when the enemy commander is trying to murder your medic. I also put in the field controller, which is when your commander is out attacking and you are not under attack, your medic is not under attack, For whatever reason, either you were able to ward off the commander or they're doing something else. Once you're full, and if you don't have a responsibility to defend, push out into the midfield while your commander's attacking, and you essentially back them up. You're kind of sniping, you're ready to swap in for them if they need it, and you're stopping everyone in the midfield from getting to do things. Just helping to push the entire enemy team back by controlling vital territory.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah, I have a similar I guess positioning tactic I like to call the bubble.
The bubble.
And it's kind of an in between of the wall and the field controller. When you aren't consistently trading with the enemy commander, but you still need to play defensively. Maybe your team is pushed up a bit in the field. You have a good amount of field control. It can be really beneficial for the heavy to expand their domain, kind of.
Yeah,
Expand
that's kind of the idea behind
space
it.
And so a lot of this relies on working with your resupply, kind of like so as an example in Loveland, maybe if you have control of third floor, the enemy team's been kicked down from third floor, maybe you can position your resupply at one end of third floor, and you as the heavy could take the other end, and all of a sudden you now have a larger range of space that you control extended to both of the ramps, rather than the three of you being packed into one spot and having to kind of just deal with like the hallway and then maybe that ramp, that which side you're on. And so I think there's a lot of benefit to all of these tactics and all these types of positioning. But yeah, I mean the bubble's a nice defensive middle ground where like you're still kind of worried about the enemy 3 hits slipping past. You don't want to necessarily be out actively supporting your commander, actively kind of like taking control of different spots on the field, but you can at least build out your range. You don't want to be packed. And I would almost say that this is kind of the goal. You won't achieve it every game. There will be a lot of games where it's just a brawl and you just have to sit on your resupply and defend them. But the goal is to push out and create that breathing room where now you have this space that you control, that you can maneuver within and that you can use to your advantage.
Absolutely. Because at the end of the day, it's still the wall. It's just a bigger wall. You're not just controlling the area that you're physically in, you're also basically controlling the areas that you're adjacent to. And if you have your team having eyes on multiple areas of the field, you could be at any of 5 or 6 different territories within a span of 5 or 10 seconds, you know?
Yeah.
So if just because you leave the resupply and you're not in their immediate vicinity, if they began screaming their head off because they see the commander coming into one area, if you've prepared for this and you're all on the same page, heavy can be ready to defend the resupply within a moment's notice, while still being out in the midfield using their shot power to control the game and keep pushing the enemy team back. So
yeah,
if you're a heavy player and you are starting to feel comfortable enough defending the resupply that you're ready to start expanding, entering the wide world of the midfield and the enemy backline, we present to you these 5 rotation strategies that you can switch between and use based on what you think is appropriate with you and your team. The swap and hold, the medic kill, the wham bam double 3-hit slam, the wall and the field controller, and I'm going to throw in a 6th one, the nuke heavy wombo combo. This is a galaxy brain maneuver. I think every SM5 team should use it. If your commander is polite enough to tell you that they have a nuke, what you can do as the heavy is tell them, okay, nuke in blank number of seconds, or they can tell you, hey, I'm nuking in blank number of seconds. If you run into the middle of the enemy team as the nuke goes off, what'll happen is, even if they deactivate you, they're all going to go down because of the nuke, and then you'll come up before all of them, and you can start resetting everybody and making them have to leave that area, often forcing them to kind of spread out.
Yep. Um, it's a tried and true. It's such a solid, effective strategy. Um, it really it just maximizes the benefit of your commander's nukes and minimizes the risks of attacking as a heavy, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
the biggest danger to attacking as a heavy is that either you'll overextend and get killed out of the game, or the enemy team will slip past you and kill your resupply. But they're all being deactivated by the nuke, and so there isn't an active threat being posed to your resupply, and so it's such a solid all around maneuver. Um, uh, I'm gonna revisit that point in a second, but I'm gonna do a little aside.
Mm-hmm.
Something that you may want to do as a resupply, obviously, enemy nuke dropping, resupply everyone, get everyone lives as much as possible. If you see the enemy heavy pushing off of the nuke, like you
Run!
got, you're, one option is to just flush preemptively. I think a lot of people actually will stubbornly try and stay.
It's
Um,
it's game over, man. You just gotta
interesting.
run.
Um,
But please
but
continue.
something
You
you
can
could
also
do
do a preemptive
is
backtrack or something.
preemptively backtrack. I think preemptive backtracking is very underused, especially in areas and fields where you have high visibility. In Loveland, in particular, typically the heavy is pushing across third floor, and you're both up there, and you have this tunnel that they have to go across, and you can resupply people, and they can backtrack before the nukes drop, and have that backtrack present before the heavy breaks in. Um, Backtracks are so important. Get your backtracks in. There's also
Mm-hmm.
a lot of other situations where maybe the heavy just isn't quite there as the nuke is going off, and so you can push out and backtrack off the nuke. Always make sure that you're backtracking. When you get put down, backtrack. When a nuke goes off, backtrack.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Especially a lot of times, if people get nuked, maybe you flush and you're going, uh, or maybe you already were flushed and you're going into a cubby or something. Defend your cubby. Make those backtracks, because when you're deactivated, you can't shoot anybody. When that nuke goes off, everybody on your team is deactivated. You can't shoot anybody. Use those backtracks to defend yourself. Um,
Breach.
yeah, yeah. But going back to the nuke wombo, um, it it this has so much more of a tie to kind of something that I think is fundamental to every rotation that you do, which is that the heavy needs to be resupplied. When your commander comes in and has that nuke ready and wants you to push in and break them, you need to be resupplied. You can't be on 5 lives and 10 shots. Uh,
Nope.
Really, you probably don't even want to be on 10 lives.
10 lives, 20 shot.
You want to
Mm-hmm.
be as full as possible when you're doing any of these rotations. You want to be healthy to go out in the field, and so much of SM5 comes down to getting resupply. It
Mm-hmm.
is really the key feature of the game, is getting resupplied shots and lives. It is one of, if not the most important aspects of the game, and getting resupplied, especially as a heavy, is an important skill in and of
Yep.
itself.
Absolutely.
And there's a notable difference between heavy players and how good they are at getting resupplied. Um, and so you need to be doing that as much as possible. You need to be creating openings and opportunities and spaces for you to do it. Um, you can, uh, you know, play a little forward, get resupplied, make backtracks. You can, just get resupplied and make backtracks. You could get resupplied as you're putting people down. Good trick to do with the heavy and ammo is, and the medic, if you can afford it, a lot of times it's easier for the ammo to peek out, but have them watch you so that as you trade with people, you can get resupplied. Um, there's you want to be making sure that you're getting resupplied as much as physically possible, and you want to make sure that you're as full as possible all the time. I know it's tempting to be like, oh well, I've got a decent amount of resupply, I'm good to defend right now. But it's not
Mm-hmm.
just about the defend. You need to be ready to go out when your commander
Yeah,
comes back and needs
definitely.
you out in the field. You need to be ready for that. So I think a lot of heavy players will get comfortable because obviously you would rather be online as much as possible. Being deactivated as a heavy is incredibly stressful. It's a terrifying feeling,
Mm-hmm.
but it needs to happen. You have to get resupplied.
Yeah, I'd like to transition to my next point if that's all right, based
Oh
on
yeah,
what you just said, and that is protect your team with trails. Odin is right. Like you inherently start with a low resupply, just from having 10 lives to start the game, 20 max, and then 20 shots, 40 max. Plus, you get refilled pretty slow. If you're on offense, you'll get more lives and generally more shots than the heavy. Heavy gets 5 shots per resupply, 3 lives per resupply. So you burn through them real quick and you get them back pretty slow. So generally, heavies don't always have the luxury of getting to be protected themselves while getting full, since they're the protectors. They're often getting resupplied while they are fighting people actively. And that is a skill in and of itself that requires a lot of coordination with the resupply. So one thing I will say is that one of the biggest tools I've ever gotten to use as a heavy that really upped my game is learning how to utilize trails. And just to be very clear and re-explain the trail rule, basically whenever in SM5 you're deactivated and you run away, pretend like there's an invisible trail behind you. Players cannot follow you more than 10 feet along that trail and point their phaser at you legally without receiving a penalty. That equates to about 3 standard steps or 2 large steps, 2 very large steps. I was just
yeah,
drinking some beverage because I was just thinking about how great trails are. Um, so basically, how you do this, it it's one thing to be activated and ready to defend your resupply by using your phaser, but it's honestly in many ways more reliable to protect your team by getting deactivated and then running towards them so that you have a trail, and anybody who attacks your team can no longer tag you down. So what I often do is I will get a resupply and then I will quickly run out towards the enemy team and then run back, all within 4 seconds so I can't get reset. And that trail means that if anyone tries to run in while I'm deactivated, they won't be able to tag me down. They can run in and they can tag my resupply, but then I get to tag them and all kinds of shenanigans can happen.
yeah,
Or oftentimes I'll play a little more forward than I have to. Instead of sitting directly on top of the resupply, I could be 10, 15, 20 feet in front of them. And if I get deactivated, I'll just run back and my resupply are automatically defended. It's like having a buffer. Um, Part of this comes from like Odin said, everyone should use trails, but especially as heavy, like you should be aware of the area that you're defending and notice where 10-foot spaces are. A lot of arenas will actually mark off where they'll use like neon tape to mark off, oh, this is 10 feet. If you're standing up here and you run behind here, it's a trail. Like go in ahead of time and become super aware of what those trails are. And even like if you're in competitive play, I always think it's a really good idea to make things very obvious for the referees. So never accuse another player of cheating or anything, but whenever you make a trail, just shout out loud, I have a trail. Make sure the other players, they make sure everyone knows that you have a trail so that there's no question about it if someone tries to come in and shoot you. What are your thoughts on trails?
yeah. I like them. Um, yeah, I think
Odin
the
approves.
best situation is being already pushed forward as a heavy and being able to make that backtrack, it can be really hard for people to run 10 feet out and then 10 feet back in the 4 second window. Um, Even really fast players, you can slip up because of the way that IR works. You could still get tagged as you're rounding the corner. Um, so ideally, you want to be pushed out as you're making the path. I also would like to say that there is an inherent risk with this, in that you're the one making the backtrack, and so people can still push out and shoot your medic, and then
Mm-hmm.
let you put him down when you come up. And if that keeps happening, they can still just keep chipping lives off the medic. And so timing is really important with this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you want sure that you're cutting it as close to the line as possible. In a lot of instances, uh, you can rely on your ammo and medic to have some decent positioning, and in that case, you probably have a short window of time as someone breaks into the resupply before they're tagging the medic. A lot of times they have to square off against the ammo first, and then they might try and shoot you. You get a little bit of leeway, and so that's where, kind of like, if you shoot somebody down and then get resupplied to make that trail, and you're leaving kind of just like a 1 second window where there's only 1 second between them being up and you being up, and they kind of have to like time that perfectly and manage to hit the medic and all that. It's That's the ideal situation, especially because that's really hard to time pushing across, because you're running out deactivated, and because of the reset mechanic, you can actually get reset. And so if you're pushing in while you're deactivated, the enemy resupply can reset you. um so like that's kind of like the optimal time to do it,
Mm-hmm.
but sometimes it just has to happen, and sometimes there's a lull, there isn't anything going on. And in those situations, maybe it's better even to just get resupplied while being tucked away where no one can see. Um, but but uh, definitely, if you're like under threat of attack, making trails whenever possible is such an important tool to use, especially as a heavy, like you said. um, yeah,
Yeah, you
yeah,
like trails.
I like trails. I like them. I like to use them. What I don't like is, because of how important they are, it means you have to do a lot of running no matter who you
Yes,
are.
you do. Yep. Oh man. And let me go to another point as well of mine.
Oh yeah.
Using your ammo carrier for profit, followed by dollar signs. Lots of dollar signs. There we go. Because we were just kind of talking about the art of getting resupplied while you're actively fighting people. That's a big part of playing heavy. And a concept that becomes really prevalent in high competitive play is the link between the heavy and the ammo. So obviously, while you're fighting and you're defending the medic, the ammo is pretty much attached to the medic by the hip. A lot of times, they have their own job. They can go out and fight and do all that stuff, but your ammo will usually be there helping you defend. And there's a number of things that you can do with this. Aiden, I'm really excited to hear what your comments will be, since you're the one who just played an ammo at Laserforce Internationals. This is coming from more of the heavy's perspective, since I've played a ton of heavy. But so you can always ask the ammo to reset your shield. If you tag the commander and you both trade, the commander will be deactivated and you will be active. A pretty common pattern is commander and heavy trade. Commander immediately asks the ammo for a reset of their shield. Ammo resets the shield, meaning they resupply you with shots, and then you go down, you come back up with all three of your shield. So that's pretty cool. That's a way that you can be actively gaining more shots than you're losing with every exchange, especially if the medic can get in there and it can become a double instead of just the shots. But that requires a lot of not just coordination with the resupply, but it also requires the luxury of your resupply and being pretty much only focused on you or ready to give that shield as soon as you ask for it. So that might require some practice. You can also always kind of expect that your ammo might be ready for you to reset off of them if needed. Perhaps you tag down the commander and they are really slow to get away from you. So you can ask the ammo for a reset, you tag the ammo, and then you can run around another way and missile the commander. Having that ammo there to reset off of is also pretty cool. There is a few more concepts that you recently introduced to me, Aiden, like letting the ammo take shots for you. This isn't to say the ammo intentionally body blocks or does anything illegal, but sometimes having your ammo stand in an area where you've been standing traditionally while you take a different position. When the commander comes in to attack, sometimes they'll shoot the ammo and then you just get to take people out while keeping all three of your lives. And that can be really beneficial when people try to do double pushes or attacking from multiple angles. Using the ammo is kind of like a dummy heavy. That's a really good way that you can work together. And finally, like there's going to be all these instances where maybe the commander runs past you into your resupply and they make a trail so you can't just run in after them. The ammo can be the ammo or the medic, but you know, a lot of times it's the ammo. They can reset off of you to keep an enemy 3-hit down. And just knowing that the ammo is there to hold a second area of ground, sometimes you come out holding your phaser up while you're deactivated and the ammo tags commander, tags you, tags commander, tags you, tags commander. And they help you with your job of defending. Like these 4 ways that the ammo can help kind of allow the ammo to be a total support for the heavy. And Aiden would love if you have extras you want to add or comments you have on any of those.
Oh, those are some good tips, Luke.
Thank you.
I like those tips a lot. Yeah, I mean, really, like I said it in the ammo video, I'll say it here, or episode, I guess. These aren't videos.
Yeah, episode.
The ammo and the heavy are best friends. As a heavy, your ammo is your best friend.
Mhm.
And realistically, a heavy shouldn't actually be running out of shots because you just should be getting reset by your ammo constantly or resupplied. Yeah, I mean, a big thing here is communication. And I'll say it every episode, I'll say it 20 times. You need to communicate. And so making sure that you're clear with your intentions is very important. Like a really easy example is with the resets. Make sure you're communicating whether you want to get a reset off of the ammo or if you want your ammo to reset your shield. It's good to clarify these things ahead of time, like, oh, I'll use this word. Another thing with getting resupplied while you're trading is like making sure you let your resupply know that you're looking for a resupply, but you're not ready yet. Like say like not yet, or give me a double in a second, and then you step out, you take the trade, and you say yes, or you say whatever you need to in order to communicate that. You get your resupply. But yeah, I mean, letting your ammo take shots for you is it's such a good, especially if you're struggling a lot, or if say you just fought against a scout and you have one out of your shield, but you can't get reset because you know the enemy pushing in. You can come back and tuck back with your resupply so that now there's 3 of you holding the one door, and you know, let that ammo just tank that first shot from that commander while you put him down. It's great. It's great. It's so good. And yeah, I mean, really, the 3 of you, the heavy, the ammo, and the medic, are all working in tandem here in the defense. You're all defending together. It's not, the medic isn't just an egg that you're
It's
trying
so
to
true.
protect.
They're not.
It's not.
That's such a good way
just
of putting
putting
it.
I mean,
Sit down, egg.
You're not just putting them in a little display case and they're just there, you know. No, it's like yeah, you're defending them. They might be, you know, like okay, you know, that's the president, but you know, I guess the president is John Wick. So, maybe you let him, maybe you let your resupply do a little bit of work too, and so, yeah, I mean, let the ammo reset off you to keep the 3 hit down. And in a similar vein, uh, I don't know if you're done with this tip. This might transition a bit to one of my other tips.
Well, I have a side
Uh,
rant real quick.
okay, yeah,
Um, just on what you said, like the look, I'm getting on my little podium.
yeah,
Resupply can learn to defend themselves without the heavy somewhat. Or maybe a better way of saying it is the resupply have a shot at defending themselves without you always being there. Like there are definitely situations where if you go off to push out, expand your bubble, or go for the medic kill, or go for the wham bam double 3-hit slam, sometimes you're in a situation where both 3 hits on both teams are trying to kill out the medic, and you're banking on your medic to die slower than the enemy medic. Sometimes that's a real way of trying to win the game.
yeah,
I think resupplies should be ready for that kind of situation and understand the value of having the heavy out there attacking. Or like if you're like trying to lessen the defensive like the wall, if you're allowing the heavy to go do something besides walling, you are all 3 working together to make this work. Maybe the resupply prepare a secondary location to travel to when the heavy's gone and they get pushed out, and the heavy can know that. Or they use
yeah,
trails themselves while calling the heavy back to buy time for the heavy. Like there's all kinds of
yeah,
things you 3 can do, but you do all 3 work in tandem. It's not the heavy's sole responsibility, especially in high competitive play, to stop enemy attackers. Like there's ways the heavy can either be delayed in their arrival or not even need to be there at all.
yeah. I mean, and as an example, and having an absent heavy, like uh, the resupply can move around, and they have a lot of options at their disposal. Still, they can still tag people, they can still move, they still get backtracks,
Mm-hmm.
and so using Loveland as an example. And
Yeah.
for those of you who don't know, Loveland has a 3rd floor that's a long strip. It's basically a hallway with a ramp that goes up and down at either side. So at either end of this hallway, there's a ramp up and into it. And so something you can do if your heavy is out, if you have control of that 3rd floor, is you can put a resupply at the top of each ramp, and they can see if people are coming in, and they can take shots at scouts. They can pop out and do that. And if need be, they can retreat to each other. And all of a sudden, they have this whole hallway that they can backtrack, that they can utilize to their advantage, and they can move around and prevent themselves from just getting destroyed. And so, as long as you have the control and space for your resupply to maneuver and do those things, then it's you can be very confident that as long as you're doing work out in the field, your resupply shouldn't be dying that fast. Because in order for that to happen, there would have to be multiple people on them, which would mean that you aren't dealing with that much out in the field, and you probably don't need to be there. Your commander's probably fine out in the field if there's 3 people on your resupply.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Definitely.
and yeah, I mean, we're saying, it's the 3 of you working together. What it's about, meeting the needs.
Yeah.
And so if your resupply is chilling and they're like, okay, we got this, you can push out for a bit. Still, make sure you're limiting yourself. You still need to be getting resupplied. You still need to be full. Um, so make sure you're not just going out and dying. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
Definitely.
have some faith in your resupply,
Well,
I guess is the lesson.
depending on the resupply, have some faith in your
Well,
resupply.
yeah, I guess that's kind of a point
with
in and of its own. Yeah,
with all of these, you are reading the context of the game.
right.
And don't hear what I'm not saying.
Yeah,
There's probably more times than not that the right choice is to be back defending your resupply from attackers. That's often going to be
yeah,
the most beneficial thing for you winning the game.
yes,
So yeah, don't hear what I'm not saying. But what look,
yeah,
here it's a pet peeve of mine when a heavy is full and they're just sitting on the resupply not doing anything. You have the most
right.
powerful shot in the game and you should be constantly using it. You should be either filling or fighting somebody at all times.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I actually, to touch on the trusting resupply thing and all that. I think an important thing with heavy is to gauge your team they need.
Hmm.
Um, this was actually especially I think it shows in members nights where you're playing with a bunch of different people every game. Um, but an issue that people have and that I have actually is reading what your resupply needs. Your resupply could have completely different dynamics based on who's in it. And some resupplies want or need to be, I suppose, babysat by the heavy,
Hmm.
uh, for lack of my brain being able to think of some better way to say it. Um, some resupplies want the heavy to stick with them and to guide them. And I think that's fine. I have my own thoughts about how I prefer to play at like the highest level of game, but you need to understand what your resupply needs in order to succeed,
Hmm.
and you need to be able to provide that for them. Some resupplies are really good at being mobile and really good at defending themselves, and you get a lot more freedom with them. Um, but you got to be able to read the situation, and that kind of leads into one of my points about leading the resupply defensively.
Yeah, let's go.
Uh, uh, the biggest thing here is just going back to communication. Um, but you need to be. You can tell your resupply, "Hey, I need you to watch this angle because you can't cover the entire field." And a lot of times you will have to defend against multiple angles, and even if you're doing well, even if you're succeeding, and maybe you're pushing out, maybe you're doing the field control, you're creating a bubble. Uh, Ask your ammo, or maybe you need both your resupplies watching angles, but ask your resupply, "Hey, I need you to watch this angle." Um, if the enemy is attacking with a 3-hit and a scout, tell them, "I have to defend against the commander, defend against the scout," and then they're at least ready. I think kind of the default mode for a lot of resupplies is being ready to resupply, and even though they know that there's a threat of people coming in, there is kind of a mental shift required to be ready to resupply someone and then realize that someone's coming in and go to shoot them.
Hmm.
Uh, and so if you can let them know like that you're not getting a resupply, that there could be a scout coming in and they need to be defending themselves, it's a good habit to build at the very least. Making sure that everyone's on the same page. Um,
Yeah.
and sometimes it's okay to just make your resupplies defend themselves against the scout, so that you can handle 3-hit and you don't have to spin around and tag everyone. And there's I think there's a bit of like ego work at play with all of the positions to a degree. And I think where the heavies is kind of like this need to be the bastion, right? Like the need to be the defender and put everyone down, keep
Hmm.
everyone out, be the wall. And you just can't always do that. And to attempt to do that when you have better options available is a faulty approach, I believe.
Yeah.
Um, Maybe you are good enough. Maybe you can do that. But maybe there is that skill discrepancy there. But you could be playing against a brand new player and maybe they just get a good shot off on you, and then the other player gets a good shot off on you, and that can happen.
Hmm.
And if you aren't using all the tools at your disposal, then it falls on you when it comes crumbling down. And so just do the best that you can. If you're being attacked from multiple angles, utilize your resupply as much as you need to. And I think that um, while the ammo kind of leads a lot of like resupply work and maybe like a little bit of the interpersonal relationship between the resupply and the heavy, and maybe they're doing some other things. The resupply has their own dynamic. Maybe the medics doing a lot of leading. They got their things going on. I think it falls on the heavy to lead the defense aspect of it.
Mm.
Whereas they might be like, okay, these are who we need to resupply. We need to get these people back. We need to rotate these people out. It's the heavy's job to say, this is what we need in order to defend our home, and coordinate those pieces as you see fit. Because at the end of the day, uh, when you're talking about this coordination and this leading, it comes down to enabling people to do their jobs. And the heavy's job is to defend. So the heavy needs to be able to communicate, and people need to be able to provide what the heavy needs in order to defend. But they can't do that if you don't tell them what that is. And I think a lot of people will get upset because they aren't getting what they need from their team. They'll be like, why aren't you putting that scout down? How are people coming in? How are you guys not doing this? Why are you there? Why are you this? And it's just because you aren't communicating. There's so many variables going on in a game. There's so many different ways to play a game. And in the backline, you as the heavy probably have the most information. You're the one out fighting people. You know what angles people are attacking from. You know what's going on. You need to be the one who takes charge and says, you need to watch this angle. You need to defend yourselves here. You need to move to here. Doing these things and being like I said, like people, you want to be a bastion, you want to put everyone down as a heavy, but rather than doing that, you're kind of like the captain of the back line.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. That's interesting because I do think it depends a little bit on the actual players there. But what I do know is that the heavy actually, despite having such a giving role where they have responsibility for other members of the team and their safety, heavies do need to be selfish. They're the ones that are keeping track of their own lives and shots, and they don't get very much of it. The worst thing a heavy can do, and I know this because it's happened probably, oh man, I don't want to say 10 times, but we're probably getting close. Probably like 10 different times in tournament play, I have overextended my resources trying to defend my team or give something to the team to overcome some kind of shortcoming of my team or myself, and I die out of the game early as heavy. And it's the worst thing that can happen to your team, except for like losing your ammo. Or maybe the commander. But like when you die out of the game because you didn't just give up some territory, or you didn't insist that the resupply prioritize you for a minute, or ask your team for help, that is a huge fail and a self-destructive tendency that will happen to a lot of players trying to play heavy. You do need to take some level of charge over yourself, even if other people on your team are calling shots in different areas. Like, I think it can actually be, it can be a little hindering if the heavy is keeping track of 3 people's positions, like if they're keeping track of their resupply's positions, but at the same time, since the resupply is somewhat built around the heavy's positioning, be selfish and even be like, don't be afraid to tell your resupply what you need from them.
Yeah. And I think like I said, like there's an ego factor in every role. And I think the heavies need to, a good heavy player needs to have a degree of humility and realize that there's no guarantee to anything.
No, that's such a good
I think
point.
some people think, I'm the heavy, I can put down a 3-hit. I've put down heavies as a scout. I've put down really, really, really good heavy players as a scout on my own. And it's not because they suck. It's because we're all humans and we play a game that operates off of software and electronics, and all sorts of things can happen. Even if you don't want to believe that an enemy player could put you down, there's so many other factors that could be at play. There's lag in the system in most fields to some degree, and sometimes that could mean that you get shot twice before your first shot even registers.
Yeah.
Which sucks, but there's so many things that can happen, and you need to be able to realize that you can't do it all, and you need to be able to recognize when things go wrong. I think it's also very common that heavies get really stubborn and they're like, no, I am going to come up. I am going to put this person down. I am going to take the ground back. Sometimes you
Uh-huh.
need to be ready to just flush.
Yep.
Sometimes you need to say, okay, we lost this. We're gone. We're out. They get this now. This isn't ours. And you need to just leave.
Yeah, honestly, the
And
phrase that you
that's
should get
fine.
used to is we'll get him in the second half. That can totally happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And it happens so much easier the sooner you make the move to recover.
Yep.
Um, and recovering is so important in this game. When you see the best teams, the win usually goes to the team that recovers better than the other team. Usually, when you're looking at internationals and you see like the two strongest teams, both of them will get put on the back foot at some point in the game.
Mm-hmm.
It'll happen to both of them. And the team that wins is usually the team that recovers better than the other team did. And you can't recover when you're being stubborn. It's not going to happen. You're not actively making progress towards that. And um and it's just not worth it. Especially like you, as much as you have to lead the resupply, you also need to listen to them. If your resupply says no, we're flushing, maybe you were being too stubborn. Maybe, yeah, you could take that back, but this is the fourth time it's happened and your medic's lost 6 lives as a result. And it's just not working out. And you need to go and you need to regroup. And that's okay. Um, you I mean, yeah, to just kind of wrap it all up, you need to listen to your resupply and you need to be willing to accept that you can't always win.
This is so important, and it gets into my next step or my next tip, which is take care of your mental state. I'll skip down to this one. Because yeah, you're so right about the ego thing. The ego doesn't help your team at the end of the day. It's important to look at yourself and think like, why am I playing this role? And if there is some element to you that's like, I want to dominate people, I want to hold down my area, and I want to have the most shot power, and just like, it's a really good feeling. It's intoxicating, really, when you are putting down attackers and just holding your territory. I notice like when I'm doing that, I will tend to start standing with like a wider stance, my chest puffed out, like you just feel like a freaking beast.
Yeah.
There's that human part of the game. The heavy does hold responsibility. You're called the heavy weapons, like it's a big deal. But like to your point, like there's lag, there's always X factors. Also, really good offenses can find ways to guaranteed push out a heavy. Like if two people come in from different angles at the exact same time, that's like it's basically a guarantee of putting down the heavy. And they do it on purpose a lot of times.
Yeah.
So you really can't have that ego, because sometimes it's not about if you can hold out all the enemy players, it's about if you can delay the inevitable breaking of your base longer than the enemy team can, especially
Right.
at high level play.
Yeah, and like we have even on this podcast told people how to get past you as a heavy.
Mm-hmm.
We've told them how to beat you, and we're giving you these tools in order to play the position to the best of your ability.
Not me, heavy players.
You the
how
audience.
to beat mischief.
You the audience, not mischief.
Mm-hmm.
We're teaching people how to play the game to the best of their ability, and if it was possible for any heavy player to guarantee that nobody could possibly get past them, then the game wouldn't be fun. Like, well, at least not for me. Maybe it would be fun for some people,
It'd
but
be fun for the heavy.
I mean, the fact of the matter is that like you can't guarantee it, and not only can you not guarantee it, it's almost guaranteed that at some point people will break past you.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen some of the lowest ranked teams in tournaments just roll through the best heavy in the tournament like a wrecking ball,
Mm-hmm.
because they say, okay, no, we need to make this attack happen now. And they get one good, coordinated, organized attack and they just break straight through. Um, it's just going to happen. And
Absolutely.
that is okay.
That's right. So we've established that you really can't expect yourself to always win these trades or these situations, but the reality is that when you're playing heavy, you you know that when you do fail, when they do break you, the consequences for your team are often detrimental. And just to be real with the audience, to get real with you, after years and years of playing heavy, it has become by far, like by a wide margin, my least favorite role. I'd rather play any of the other 4 positions in competitive play and at a members night play at this point, because I think basically because of the traumatic situations where every time I fail at my job, my team has to suffer major consequences and I watch the game fall apart in front of me. It has become so
I yeah,
stressful. So my
yeah, I oh my
Go ahead,
god,
go ahead.
I don't know if you can hear my cat. He's
Oh,
whining.
I hear your cat.
Yeah.
Your
Sorry,
your cat
he's
relates.
upset.
Yeah, can you relate to
I do
this?
too. No, I I would say that if I had to venture a guess at, or if I had to make a claim on what my strongest position is right now, I would say that it's heavy. Um, and I just it is it's almost hard for me to enjoy the role.
Yeah.
Not that I don't have enjoyment in playing it, and I can play heavy and enjoy it in the game, but like you said, it's almost like a trauma. Like it's almost like I have this recollection of each instance where I have failed my team, and it like weighs on
Mhm.
me. It's a lot. It's very stressful, and I'm sure I could sum it up probably 5 times as many good plays that I've made or good instances where I've specifically led my team to success or I've done some pivotal act in the game.
Mhm.
But those moments where uh the enemy team breaks past you, it's humbling and could can even feel humiliating,
Yeah. Oh,
even though
yes, absolutely.
uh it's like a normal thing. It's like, well, I can put everyone down in one shot, so why didn't I put everyone down? I
Mhm.
could have done it.
Mhm.
And oh yeah, it's really rough. Do you have any tips possibly for how to deal with that in game?
Yeah, absolutely. That's my tip, is take care of your mental state. Because yeah, we both dealt with this, and speaking as someone who's studying to become a mental health counselor right now, we actually are wired so that it takes about 5 positive memories or 5 positive interactions for us to overcome one negative memory or one negative interaction. So that's pretty normal that your failures stick with you way more than your successes ever do as a heavy. So one first thing is just recognizing that you're playing a pretty taxing position and it's a lot of responsibility. And maybe just to think about that for a minute, like, because for some people, it's not a good position for them simply for the mental. There are some
Right.
players who are great heavies, but they have a hard time holding up throughout a week of tournament play or against really high intensity teams. Some players play fine during members night and then they start to freak out in the middle of like tournament games because of that responsibility. So it's led me to believe that the types of people who are best suited for playing heavy weapons are the people who are cool as a cucumber, who can find it in them to detach themselves from the game somewhat. Like there's an extreme where you don't want to be too detached from the game because then you're not trying your hardest. But if you're having a literal like panic attack in the middle of a game, due to the weight of it all, that's something to weigh.
Yeah.
Um, I recommend. I think there's in game and out of game for this. I think if you're in game and you're having a hard time with your mental state, one thing you can do is literally breathe. Take slow, deep breaths in and out if you can manage it, and try to get out of your head, basically, and kind of recognize like I'm in the middle of a game. Um, I'm gonna make the best moves I can, but I am not guaranteed success. That's that's a realistic way to look at it. Just trying to breathe and slow yourself down. That's what I'd recommend for that. But outside of the game, I have had the most success personally with taking walks and meditation. Taking a walk is a great way that's proven to kind of calm your body, help you process thoughts. It just, especially being alone for a minute, like if you're preparing to play heavy or you just came out of playing heavy, taking a walk is really good. And before games, meditating, like you don't have to like, do crisscross applesauce and make monk noises, but if you just close your eyes and you breathe and you try to empty your mind of thoughts and let them go, you enter a you can help yourself enter kind of a in the moment state where you're not as anxious about what's about to happen, and that can carry into the game. Because you just gotta keep the mentality that you can only do your best and you might fail. Like, really, what you need to get down to is the mentality that if I fail, it's okay. I think this will, it might sound counterintuitive, but I think it'll actually make people play better because
Yeah.
they won't be playing so fearfully.
Well, and I think addressing your fears and that it's okay dynamically shifts the way that you play the game to a better play style. I think we cover some of it in a lot of the tips here, but playing with the understanding that at some point you will fail, it eh, like don't be ready to accept defeat, but understand that at some
Right.
point someone will get past you. You can prepare for that. You can be more ready to respond to those outcomes than a player who is so stuck in their head and so stuck in their ego that they are only planning for success.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not going to turn this whole episode into a mental health deep dive. Just,
Uh,
there's
Honestly,
a whole
that
video for that. And it's just, I think it's most important on the heavy because of how taxing it is.
yeah, I'm going to drag it out a little longer
Let's
because
go.
I think that managing your mental and the way that you respond to things in the game is one of the most important things to being successful as a heavy, and a lot of people struggle with it.
It's true.
Um, I will ask you a question, Luke.
Okay.
What do you do, or what would you suggest that listening heavy when they are frustrated with the things that their resupply is doing? Like maybe the resupply put them down at a bad time, or maybe the resupply flushed when the heavy didn't want them to flush, and they are upset about that. What, or even to a greater extent, maybe the resupply is kind of just doing their own thing and not collaborating with the heavy as much as they would like.
Definitely.
What would you do or suggest that somebody does?
This is a terrible question. I don't like that you asked it.
I am sorry. You can cut it out if you want.
No, 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 no. Okay, I kind of have two angles on this. I think the most useful thing I would say is that you do need to anchor yourself and get a hold of yourself before trying to get a hold of someone else. Because, man, it's so hard when you're the one playing heavy and your resupply are the ones freaking out and playing badly. It really affects your ability to succeed, even when you're doing everything right. If your resupply are messing up, then you're kind of being dragged down with them, and that can be maddening.
Yeah.
So I would say start by breathing and figuring out what the best thing you can do right now to win the game is. Because maybe if this is a 2-game match or something, if you go outside of the game and talk to them about what happened and, make plans to do things differently in the future, that's really good for next time. but you are in the middle of a firefight. And so you don't have time to really talk out a lot of this stuff. So I would get a hold of yourself and I would do the best with what you have. Meaning maybe you need to expect to have less tools at your disposal than you might want. And especially in a high competitive play game, that might be a really impossible situation. There's times when my resupply have freaked out, fled, left me stranded with 5 lives, or 3 lives, or 2 lives, and I basically am like, okay, so basically, I can take the risk to run down my ramp and find them, and hope I get there with 1 life, or I can start calling for them over and over to let them know how urgent it is and make it very clear to everyone, including the enemy team, where I am and that I need lives, and hope that they get here first. And both options are really crummy. But the unfortunate reality is that you don't have better options in that situation.
Yeah. Actually, in that specific situation, not to cut away from the very serious and good deep talk we're having.
Oh, you're good.
Something that you can do if you're in a really bad spot like that as a heavy is pull up and get a scout.
Get a scout to
Get
help
a scout
you,
and
bro.
say, you need to bring the medic to me or I'm going to die.
That's also
And
a great
I have
idea.
done this a lot of times, actually. It's happened more often than it should. Maybe not on heavy specifically every time, maybe on scout or commander or ammo. I will say it actually happened just recently. I was just out at Loveland and I had a heavy game and I was I there was a lot that happened and it was kind of like start of the night. I think a lot of people were shaking rust off and there's just a lot of kerfuffle that happened.
Mm-hmm.
And
course.
my resupply made a lot of decisions that I strongly disagreed with, and we got in a disadvantageous situation.
What
And
a very
for the
proper
most
way of
part,
putting that. So politically correct.
for the most part, a lot of what happened at the start of the game, I also played poorly. I didn't recognize what my resupply needed. I didn't think about or look for that, and
Mm-hmm.
so I wasn't the type of heavy that my resupply needed. Things went poorly. There was a lack of communication, and then I responded poorly to that by rather than gathering myself and trying to recollect my team and gather my resupply and do all that, I decided to fight and try and claim space and control the field and make an opening.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas that obviously wasn't what my resupply was looking for. They were obviously panicking and doing their own thing, and
Mm-hmm.
I needed to prioritize them. But they had their own roles and going questionable places and leaving me in my time of need and
Mm-hmm.
betraying my trust and
Yeah.
no. But I ended up on 1 life in a hole, begging my scouts to bring my medic to me.
Oh, it's beautiful.
And
It's just a funny
you know,
situation. Not to laugh at your misery.
it's a lot funnier in hindsight when you're not actively being the heavy on 1 life.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I agree. Just do the best that you can with the situation, and I think the biggest thing is when you're in the middle of a game is not the time to try to teach people or change their gameplay.
Yes, it's not
Um,
at all.
and I know that it is everyone's first instinct, or at least most people's first instinct, to be like, wow, this person is doing this thing that is frustrating me. I'm going to tell them how I think they should play the game.
Yep.
And it is so detrimental to your team in that
Mm-hmm.
game. It is not going to help anybody. No player will be able to immediately apply, even say you're like the smartest, best laser tag player
It
in the
doesn't
world.
matter. They're not going to
It,
listen to you in the middle of a game because we're
exactly.
emotional creatures.
Yeah.
They are also freaking out and they think you should be doing something different, most likely.
And even if they take you 100% serious, even if you're giving perfect advice, even if they want to, not a single person is going to be able to change their gameplay and apply a new strategy or learn something new
Hmm.
in the 20-second span that you need them to in order for that to work for that game.
Yeah.
Um, and, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Um, and so I would say that definitely don't do that. Don't be trying to tell your team everything that they're doing wrong. Instead, think forward. Okay, we are currently in this situation. What do I need right now?
Hmm.
And that is sometimes the best that you can work with. It actually always is the best that you can work with because, like we said, you can't change anything.
Hmm.
Obviously, you can't go in the past. Um, so, okay, maybe your resupply flush at that time. That's now the situation you're in. And
Hmm.
you need to go find them and you need to stabilize. And maybe that's not where you wanted to be, but that's okay. Maybe it sucks, but it sucking doesn't change anything about you're now in the situation and you have to figure out what to do.
Yeah.
Um, and sometimes if you are really struggling to do what you need to with your resupply, maybe there's a root cause of that, and maybe that's something you can address. Maybe your resupply is having a hard time managing resupplies because the enemy team is putting so much pressure on you. And maybe that's something you could address by getting some resupply and then going and attacking the enemy resupply so that they have to pull back. Sometimes there are things that you can do to address the root cause rather than just playing the blame game or complaining or feeling like everything sucks. There's sort of a reason for everything to happen. And sometimes that reason is just you're not on the same page, or sometimes people are panicking.
Hmm.
Um, but think about what you can do to make the situation more favorable for the outcome that you want, I guess.
Absolutely. If I were to sum up my point, I think it's just practice acceptance. Like, if
Yeah.
you practice acceptance, you can get to all that stuff that Odin just talked about. Like, how do I actually make this better? Even if I make it go from an F to a D, you know, if I were to use the grading
Yeah.
system.
That can change games. Our match in finals at Nats this year, um, we the first game we were eliminated, but we were eliminated but won on points prior to the elimination, and that little thing, that little bit of bright light, uh, gave us so much motivation and brought victory kind of like into sight. Like, even though we were eliminated in the first game, we were like, this is so winnable because we kept it as close as possible.
Hmm. We
And
got an F
espe-
plus.
yeah, yeah, actually, like especially in tournaments with matches where you're playing two games,
Hmm.
um, making a loss slightly less bad of a loss can be the difference between losing and winning the match.
Hmm.
And so, collecting yourself and just doing the best that you can in at any situation is just so important. And I know that a lot of these things, we talk about tournament play, we talk about highest level play and coordinated play, and it can be hard to see in members nights. Um, but really do your best to keep it in mind. And these are tips to bring with you when you go to tournaments, when you play in tournaments or you play in leagues or you play in competitive environments. Maybe revisit some of these. Maybe, you know, focus on addressing some of these more team specific or competitive play specific tips. I think at the end of the day, a lot of us are just trying to play this game at the highest level we can, which involves going to tournaments
Right.
and playing in that environment.
Hmm.
And for a lot of us, the goal is to perform the best that we can there. And I know it's fun to wreck people in members nights, but I've known some people who were very good players in members nights, but very bad in tournaments because they couldn't handle the pressure, because they couldn't handle the high level of play, and because they didn't know how to play in these coordinated environments. They just knew how to play in the chaos.
Yeah, it's true. It doesn't always translate. If I can go on a little side tangent here, now that we're almost 2 hours into the video, um, here's your 22 heavy tips. Um,
Yeah.
like
Plus guided meditation.
be because because heavy because high level heavy play is so intrinsically linked with high level ammo and medic play. There are often a lot of situations where the heavy is demanding certain things from their resupplies in order for them to do their job, which is high intensity and stressful and really important. So when I'm playing heavy with my resupply in a tournament, I absolutely speak to them often with a lot of intensity, or I will yell, or I will be really stressed out while just expecting this level of performance from them. And they expect me to speak like that because they want me to succeed and do as well as I can for them. It's a win-win all around, but a lot of times you get that type of communication on teams, and it's okay. It's actually quite appropriate considering the intensity and stakes that are at hand. But I can tell you that I have personally hurt a lot of feelings and even shooed away members by demanding that kind of performance from them in a members night game. Just like it's normal for me because I've played intense tournaments, but when you're a fresh punk off the street and you come in playing a game of laser tag, and then this person just starts like yelling at you and demanding the world of you, the context,
Yeah.
it just doesn't line up, and like it is so different for them.
Yeah.
So I wanted to throw in this nuance because there's actually a level where I would suggest that at a certain point when you're resupply freak out and you're trying to breathe and take stock of the situation, just letting go of winning in certain members night games, I think is absolutely the right call sometimes, to be honest.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't think um trying to pull out the victory is worth the human relationships within certain contexts, especially with newer players.
I agree. In members night specifically, sometimes it's not worth holding on to trying to push through for the win. And I've had some instances where to give an example, my medic died out early. Uh, Everyone was stressing out, and I told the ammo player, I'm like, okay, well, we'll just go into a corner and practice shield resets. We'll go in a corner. I'll defend to the best of my ability, and you can practice resetting my shield. And we did that. And there was too many people in the enemy team, and when you're getting your shield reset against 6 people who are all trying to shove into your cubby, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
The timing just doesn't add up. But there was something to be gained there. I try to get something out of every game if possible. I don't think that you necessarily have to worry about that, but work with what you have. You're still in that game. I still believe in trying and still playing the game. I don't believe in clipping your phaser up and walking around because you think it's hopeless.
No, never.
I find that to be kind of disgraceful behavior. But you, especially in members nights, it's there for practice. It's there for enjoyment. You don't have to. Winning isn't the only thing there. When you're at a Nats, it's all about winning and getting to the top in a dignified manner, hopefully.
Hopefully, but sometimes it's a little gross, but it's okay most of the time in a Nat situation.
Yeah, in members night, people are there to have fun. People are there to practice and get better. And you're not getting practice in, and you're not getting better when your team is screaming at you because they're freaking out, and they want to win an unwinnable game. It's just not helpful. As something I'll say too is that like the intensity is such a big thing, and you're playing a very loud, very active game. I have a lot of instances where I will yell to my team, and I'm not trying to yell at my team.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very rarely actually mad at my
Mm-hmm.
team. Sometimes I'll be upset with the situation. Um, but I understand that it can be mistakenly received. And something I would suggest, especially for people who are like bringing their friends in to try the game out, is to have them just sit in a game. Like,
Mm-hmm.
put a ref pack on them, have them sit in a corner and just watch and absorb the intensity.
Yeah,
Because that first game is going to be culture shock.
absolutely.
They're not going to be ready, even if they do this. But I think it's a good way to ease them in and make them realize how intense it is before they set foot in a game. I think it's really important to kind of like acclimate them a little. Um, I also think it's important to realize that there's no excuse for targeted aggression or name calling, but also sometimes when your team is yelling at you, they're just trying to communicate. Like I said, the game is super loud, especially like
Mm-hmm.
you have all the sound effects for getting shot and resupplied going on, all the screaming on the soundboard. Everyone's calling stuff out.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you have to communicate across distances. A lot of yelling happens. It's not always anger. It's actually, I would say, probably more often than not, just trying to communicate. And so try your best not to take things
Yeah,
personally.
a lot of times it's just urgency.
Right.
It's reflective
I
of the necessary, sorry, the level of intensity of the situation. If I say
yeah,
lives now, now, like I could be at 1 or 2 lives when that happens, and if you don't
yeah.
give me lives right now, I'm gonna die.
It's an aspect of language that we are utilizing to convey importance
Uh-huh.
or urgency. um there was actually a game in Sacramento where I was looking for my medic and could not find my medic, and I was calling out to them and screaming for them because I wasn't hearing anything back. I had no clue where they were. uh and somebody who was uh, there heard the screaming and thought that I was yelling at a person and like demeaning a person or
Mm-hmm.
like attacking them. Where really I had no clue where they were and I wasn't calling them names or anything. I was actually just hoping that they heard my voice somewhere in the arena and could help me.
Mm-hmm.
And so, anyways, this person went out and ended the game because they thought that I was being a there. And then the player came out and they were like, no, that was fine. Is they understood that it wasn't a matter of aggression, and I think that that's just something that happens, and we need to be ready for.
Yeah.
And for any new players listening, um, the game is really intense, and prepare yourself for that going in.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I mean, I'll have games where I was out doing other stuff. I'm not like mentally adjusted to go into the game, and then I go in, and somebody will say something super like aggressively towards me, and I'll just be like, "Oh, I am upset now." And I'm pretty good at like quickly grounding myself and being in the game and not letting stuff get to me. Um, but it will upset me, at least in the moment, and I'll be like, "Oh wow!" And at times in the past, maybe I got a little petty about it. When I was like a fresher player,
Mm-hmm.
it would be like, "Oh well, if you don't like what I'm doing, then screw you." But
Mm-hmm.
no, I mean, yeah, it's an intense game. There's going to be a lot of intensity. You got to be ready for it and try to be as respectful as you can. Like, if you're frustrated with something your team is doing and you're communicating something that you need them to do, don't demean them, don't demoralize them. It's not going to help. You're not going to get what you want. So
Yeah,
why would you do it?
absolutely. All right. We need to get to our final 2 tips. Luckily,
Yeah,
they're pretty close together and probably not going to take that much explaining. You want to start?
yeah, yeah. My tip is to practice pre-firing. This is where you know that you're going to take a shot against somebody, and you go to start pulling the trigger before you get to that point. The reason for this is because uh, there's very tiny, but there is a window of time before you start pulling the trigger and before the shot actually goes off or before you fully pull the trigger. Um, and this just takes that into account when you know that you have to fire at a specific location. Um, this is useful for every position. Everyone can do that, but it's so useful as a heavy because you have a defensive advantage. Typically, you are behind cover, watching out. You know that an attacker is coming from a specific angle, and you have the element of control here. You know exactly when and where the fight will happen. The enemy commander, maybe they need to look for multiple angles for you to pop out. Maybe at the very least, they don't know when you'll pop out. You could stay tucked in that corner all the way until they come around, or you could pop out whenever you want.
Mm-hmm.
And so, practicing starting to pull the trigger right before you pop out will cut down on your bad trades. I won't say that this will guaranteedly put everyone down safely before they can manage to get shot off. People in this game have good reaction speeds and they're prepared for you. And there's a bit of delay in the way that the game operates where they have a window of retaliation. But at the very least, it cuts down on those situations where you step out and then go to pull the trigger and they put you down in the meantime. And all of a sudden, you're off and they're on.
Mm-hmm.
This is at least meant to make it so that you're mutual. At least you're both getting shot. And oftentimes you will get the advantage on the shot. You will put them down with no risk to yourself and or no penalty to yourself. You won't get tagged, and that is amazing. But it's just a very good thing to practice and work on. But there is a little caveat of this, and that is to be careful of shooting your resupply when you're packed into a cubby. With IR bleed, a lot of times you'll pick up on your resupply's IR, and if you're pre-firing, then you could still be on your resupply's IR as you're popping out and firing on that instead of the enemy attacker. And that is definitely not what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very bad situation. Um, so that's just something to be mindful of. And that kind of comes down to positioning a bit. You typically don't want to be like on top of your resupply in tight cubbies often because you get a lot of these awkward interactions like that. But aside from that, it's just a good habit to build defensively, and it will help you a lot.
Definitely. That's a really good tip. Something I learned later in my career, and it works really well. One of my secret favorite things about heavy, like kind of a low key thing, is I actually like the shot speed. It's not an advantage, but there is a nice rhythm to it, and it's definitely I think the easiest class to practice pre-firing with. I don't know if it. Do you think there's?
Oh yeah.
Do you think there's like an extra little bit of time compared to other classes before your shot goes off? Like, is it easier to pre-fire on heavy?
I wouldn't say so. I would say that's more noticeable, uh, because you're putting everyone down in one shot because you're having these square offs.
Hmm.
But I don't know. I pre-fire so many so many shots. At Nats this year, I had the most shots fired, and it's because I would peek every corner and pre-fire every corner when we were looking around and like hunting people or I was sweeping areas.
Yeah, why not?
Why not? It's so satisfying, but it's such a good habit to build. Really, anytime you're popping around corners, but especially defensively.
Mm-hmm.
But I see what you mean about the shot speed rhythm. I think that's actually a good thing that ties in loosely is getting used to your shot speed and maximizing it.
Mm-hmm.
Because it as close as you can possibly fire to your shot speed will maximize the number of shots you can get off in a window, which helps so much. There, I, I I feel pretty comfortable with most of the shot speeds firing pretty close. I think I got in Nats this year 4 shots off as fast as physically possible, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you might know the game I'm talking about.
Yep.
But
Do you want to
unfortunate?
go ahead,
I'm
open the
sorry
wound. Go ahead,
to
open the
open
wound.
it up. I'm sorry.
I already talked about it with my
I can-
therapist and everything.
I ran past a doorway and opening and got 4 shots off in the time it took me to run past the doorway. It was very quick, and it was a matter of just having that shot speed tempo down. Um, and that's on an ammo with the standard shot speed. But it helps a lot on heavy too. The difference between pulling a trigger and then waiting and pulling it, or spamming the trigger and getting a little bit of extra delay on the shot when you're defending against multiple people,
Mm-hmm.
can be life or death. When you're getting those off as fast as possible, that's like the ideal situation against multiple attackers, or when you're pushing into the enemy resupply. So practice with that. When you're just waiting for a game to start, sit there pulling the trigger and get the tempo going. Get used to it.
Okay, I'm gonna give the final 10th tip. Definitely only 10 tips in this video. Work on your quick shot.
Yeah.
It's high noon. You're standing behind a wall looking out at the enemy commander who's charging at you. The tumbleweed rolls across the battlefield. You hear the music. It's time for you to whip out from behind the wall and tag down the commander as quickly as possible. This is a very common technique that is needed to be used in all roles, really, but particularly the heavy, because you are often on the defense, fighting incoming commanders and even heavies. I think this is probably even more important to use against other heavies, because if you pop out and the commander tags you once and you're a little slower and you tag the commander, like, that's fine. The commander still goes down, you have 1 hit point. But if an enemy heavy's charging at you and you miss your shot, or you're too slow and they tag you down first, I mean, what a freaking waste. I mean, your defense wasn't good enough only because you weren't quick enough to come out from behind the wall and do this shot. So something that I've seen be pretty important for high level heavies is learning how to use a quick shot. I've noticed 2 techniques that I'm going to kind of talk about here, but there's plenty. I've noticed that lots of people find their own rhythm. For most people, what I've seen is they find a way to square up their phaser along their chest, so that when they come out, it'll be a legal shot. The phaser comes out at the same time as the shoulder and the chest plate. They thrust their leg into the ground. They push with their leg to propel their body forward out into the open, and that gives them enough speed to land the shot quicker. And what I do is I'll actually plant my foot, one of my feet, wider so that it's out in the open, and I'm kind of in a really wide stance, and I'll actually crank my hip one direction and kind of crunch my body that way. It's kind of like a retraction muscle movement with my hip and my I don't know, my liver, I don't know, whatever is along the one side of your body. And so I retract all my muscles on one side and kind of like force my upper body to bend, and my shoulder comes out just before my phaser, and that keeps it very legal for me to come out and tag other people. And I've seen other varieties, but really you need the lean shot. Person just like leans their body backwards.
There's the wave, the scythe wave.
Mm-hmm. The scythe
where
wave.
You wave your hand out to try and bait a shot out, and then you pop out.
Scythe just might be the king of the quick shot.
He's so good with it.
There's so many ways to do it, and you need to practice it. There's not really a way. You need to go and find what works best for your body and your body type in the arena you're playing in. Finding some way to come out lightning quick and tag your opponent while maintaining its legality.
Yeah. I think one thing that people should do is, in general, exercise.
That helps for sure.
But I mean, specifically, like doing squats and lunges and practicing your side steps and stuff, like getting those muscles down and having that quick burst speed is so helpful here.
Mm-hmm.
And then something that I would say when you're doing the quick shot, to be really aware of your tells. Um, Everyone is going to be looking for stuff in you when they're pushing against you. For a lot of people, what that is the head. And you're because you're peeking out, you're watching, you're waiting for a moment to go. A lot of people will look for head movement and will try and see what you're doing. Something I like doing if I'm defending behind a wall that I'm looking over to see is I like to do like a little bunny hop, and then as I land, I'll push off and do my sidestep. Um, just because watching the head go up, you don't commit to you don't jump. You just do a little bunny hop because
Mhm.
people see the head start to go up, and then they move their phaser to aim up, and then I get that sidestep out. And so playing off of your tells and especially in particular using your head can help a lot. Something you can do is like if you peek your head out really low or really high, and then you come out at a different elevation, that can even help you win some trades.
Mhm.
Um, I know Cody from Syracuse does this shot. It's maybe not his quick shot, but it's certainly a shot that he does where he gets really low and sticks his butt out and levels himself towards the ground to like minimize the vertical space that he takes up.
Mhm.
Um, I saw that go very poorly for him. I was reffing directly behind him when he did it one time and almost fell into the splits. That was
Yeah,
so,
that's not good, but Cody's actually very good
yeah,
at the quick
yeah,
shot. His normal
he
shot
is.
is he'll tuck his phaser right underneath his shoulder, and I think he does the
Yeah,
leg thrust. He like throws his whole body into the open really quick, and it's definitely one of the quickest draws in the West, you know. I guess the East, really.
yeah. Um, yeah, there's a lot of ways to do it. Just you got to find a way to come out from behind the wall and tag somebody really quick without just meandering out like you're a villain in an action movie and then just getting blasted.
But you bring up really good points about your tells, and especially when someone's pushing against you over and over, it's good to have other techniques to use, or at least to change up the tempo or the way you do your shot. Because when if you're the attacker and you're out in the open, you're banking on being able to guess what they're gonna do and tag as soon as they come out and try to mutual with them.
Yeah,
So I've seen people, you know, they'll do a quick shot and then they do like a slow shot, and I pre-fire, or Scythe waves his hand out in the open and I fire, and then he comes out. Sometimes they look high and then they come in just low, or they don't even come out. They just stay back and shoot me as I come in. You know, you switching it up,
yeah,
trickery, that's definitely way more effective than just out muscling someone.
yeah.
Most times. Some people are just Sonic the Hedgehog, and you're like,
I swear that some people, uh, yeah, I feel like I have pretty good reaction speed, but some people are just like it's so instantaneous, and a lot of that is the pre-firing. Practice your pre-firing.
mhm,
It freaks people out. They're like, "How did they already shoot me? It felt like they shot me before they came around the corner."
yeah.
Like they still have to visually process you, and their reaction speed might be really fast, but they still have to process you coming out. And if you're already shooting as that happens, or like you're starting to before it happens, they'll trip people up. They'll get freaked out.
Yeah. Okay. That was 10 heavy tips for playing
Glad we could get a
heavy weapons.
quick little short heavy tip video in for the viewers.
Yeah, for the casual players.
And they could listen to well, you know, they're having their quick snack.
Hmm.
Uh, take a little snack break, 10 minutes.
Yeah, watch this on times 21 speed. What is one thing you want players to take away from this discussion?
Oh, oof. One thing that I want players to take away from this discussion is the mental health thing. Really, like you need to. There is a mental state requirement to playing this role, especially. But honestly, in the game in general, and especially at higher levels of competition, you have to be able to have a good mental state going in. So really just do your best to work on that. I know Luke has some good content out there for it. Um, but at the end of the day, you got to realize it's a game. You're doing this for fun. You're trying your best. Things don't always go your way. Everyone's human. Humble yourself, uh, and just play to the best of your ability.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for capitalizing on or recapping that point. It's a really good one. And we care so much about the people in this community, want people to enjoy the game and keep coming back. So take care of your mental health. And what I want players to take away is just recognizing the heavies more than a wall, more than a defender. There's a lot of nuance at the high levels, and I hope this video gives some tools for thinking about what the heavy positioning potentially could be. All right. We'll wrap it up there. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see Odin around again, I'm sure, soon.
Yeah, it's been good. Take care and get good at the game.
Or else.
Or else. I want all these new players to beat me up in laser tag.